The format now takes a little bit of a change. So what I'm going to do is introduce, by way of some remarks, a panel of our kind sponsors who are going to talk about cloud and digital transformation. And I'm going to introduce it by talking about digital transformation. So in the 16 years since I co-founded this company, I've had the opportunity to be involved in all of the interesting things that are going on in this industry. And that's why today I want to talk to you about digital transformation, evolve or die. So in nature, we have this rather wonderful transformation process where something rather ugly, like a caterpillar or a chrysalis, can turn into something beautiful, like a butterfly. And it's my belief that enterprises need to undergo transformation digitally in order to survive as well. So today I want to talk about how enterprises are being disrupted and how technology really is an accelerant in that process. But most importantly, I think, I want to help us understand what the opportunity is to participate as service providers as an integral part of that transformation process. So what's in it for me? What's in it for us? And how do we secure that future? So first of all, how are enterprises being disrupted? So technology is changing, many aspects of our lives as more and more processes get automated. So it's changing the way we bank, the way we shop, the way we manage and monitor our health, the way we use technology in the workplace. And here is the iconic London taxi cab. So I'm from the UK, obviously, and this is an industry which is undergoing transformation, or it's going to die. And digital transformation is kind of enabled by this convergence of mobile and internet and cloud. And Uber's a good example because it just takes advantage of the location awareness of where you are in the phone, and it puts this information into the cloud to connect passengers and users. The point is that in the past, anything remotely resembling Uber would have required specialized in-car systems, radios, customer call centers, etc. In today's world, all it takes is a good idea. And that's why I believe digital transformation is an imperative. It's not an option. And of course, disruption has this exponential effect. And as Michelle alluded to earlier, we don't know, who's going to end up winning here, but Uber's certainly going to be a participant in the autonomous or driverless car market. Potentially these firms could be disrupted or they could be players. The jury is out. Uber's already delivering things and stuff as well as people. And potentially, there's disruption to come for the logistics companies. We've all heard about Uber and Airbnb and so on, but this is happening all over the place. So who would think that the boarding kennel business would be being disrupted at the moment? So the kennel business where you send a pet on when you're on vacation, it usually costs quite a lot of money to do that. This industry is facing disruption by a company like Borrow My Doggy, where you can actually go and have your pet sat for you during a vacation rather than paying out. I guess the point is that digital native entrants in every market are introducing this shift to digital processes. And here you can see just some of those disruptors, across all kinds of industries here, and some of the enabling technology that is supporting that disruption. But of course, most organizations are not digital native organizations. And so the biggest and most persistent challenge they have is, how can I respond? How can I respond to these new companies and technologies which are focused on destroying my core profit engine? And the fact is that because they typically introduce better technology, better consumer experience at a lower price, enterprises need to undergo transformation in order to compete in the digital economy. Survival isn't mandatory, right? So I think we all know these firms that have gone by the wayside. Hanjin is a more recent example. So the world's biggest shipping container company, which went spectacularly bust at the end of August. The number 2 player in the market, Maersk, believes that it can avoid a similar fate by digitizing its processes. This is an industry which is woefully under-digitized. It believes it can save up to 30% of its operational costs by putting in place digital process to do things like making sure that hatches are closed and be able to detect that automatically, by figuring out optimal ways to load and unload containers, by communicating with port, by adjusting the journey of the ship in terms of both speed and so on for fuel consumption. And there are success stories, right? So cloud and digital transformation. So Royal Bank of Scotland is a bank that was rescued by the British taxpayer, and it knew that it needed to transform. So what it did was to survey all its 1,500 branches to see, which of them were being most used, because it feared that many of them were hardly being used at all. And what do you think it found? Do you think it found that the High Street branch in the centre of London or in Edinburgh had the most traffic? Well, no. What it found is that the most traffic that it had to its website came from a train. In fact, the 701 from Reading to Paddington, which is a commuter journey of about 30 minutes from the west of England into London, where 167,000 customers were using it. And what it did was to take that to inform what it was doing with cloud, containers, and mobile, to make sure that it could deliver the banking applications to all kinds of endpoint devices. So this fist-sized piece of metal houses the compressor inlet temperature valve for a Boeing 777 jet engine. And the reason this is super interesting is because there's a revolution going on in manufacturing, moving from the physical to the digital. It's the first FAA-approved 3D printed part for use in GE's engines. And what this means is that these parts can be printed and produced where they are required, rather than having to be manufactured and shipped. And of course, we know GE is using cloud for its service design and its service delivery. Perhaps the best example, and it may be known to you, John Deere, which has traditionally been a company which sells high capex agricultural equipment, has reinvented itself by collecting data now from the machines in the field so that it can sell ongoing services, maintenance and upgrades and so on. In fact, there are about 250,000 John Deere machines now sending data back to John Deere's hybrid cloud, and it is effectively operating an air traffic control system for agricultural systems. And we can think about the other kinds of services that it's going to deliver through this control system going forwards. So what are the business imperatives? So intelligence, so being able to find and access and analyze large amounts of data to make data-driven decisions. Agility, being able to change to respond to conditions quickly, and having and supporting all kinds of systems of engagement. And it requires the transformation then of information. So your customers, they communicate in blogs and tweets and posts and email and so on, not in rows and tables. Can you handle that? Transforming processes, possibly the most difficult piece, transforming organizational processes, but it also means automating and creating new and continuous ways to innovate and develop using DevOps methods. And then there's the transformation of the platform itself. And what we're really talking about here is moving from, let's call it the old style of IT, which is very siloed and hardwired, to a new style of IT, which is much more flexible, where IT, instead of being a cost center, becomes the service delivery organization, and IT is used as a differentiator. So most organizations are going to want to take advantage of both existing equipment as well as new technology. So that world is going to be a hybrid one. And the opportunity for digital transformation is to connect technology with information assets, with customer experience, and with marketing. And it is not a destination or a one-time event. It's a journey, and that's why a new style of IT has to be in place in order to support that. So Michelle referred to our commentator network and used some of the data, so I'm going to do the same in a more limited way. So we asked our commentator network then about what they're doing with regard to digital transformation. Which of the following best describes your company's status with regards to digital transformation? We don't have any, we're considering it, we're in the planning stage, and we have a formal strategy. And it turns out that about 40% of organizations are not doing it, about 20% are thinking about it, and another 40% are actively engaged. I mean, it really tells us this, the kind of doors are open are here, and it's really falling into place as a business imperative. So how is technology an accelerant, and what are we talking about here? So thinking back to 2006, so Amazon, pulled a rabbit out of the hat with the launch of EC2 and S3. Fast forward to 2016, and the rabbit still enjoys a substantial lead over the chasing pack. There are other dogs in this race now, but just to put it into perspective, so Amazon's AWS revenue is equal to the revenue of all of the other 202 IaaS vendors put together that we cover in the research, which is pretty phenomenal. And Amazon's revenue now, the enterprise value is reckoned to be about $150 billion, or about half of Amazon.com's, entire revenue. Or to think about it another way, it's taken Amazon 10 years to get to a valuation of $150 billion. It took IBM nearly 100 years to achieve that. That's how fast, this industry is moving. Now, the interesting thing is, does the rabbit ever get caught? And my colleague Al Sadowski is going to be talking about this tomorrow at the wrap-up session, about Amazon being the 800-pound gorilla. So the speed of change, I think, is accelerating here. When we look at the workloads which are running on these different clouds at the moment, it's about 40%, as Michelle was saying earlier. Fast forward 2 years, and we can see that about 60% of workloads are going to be running in some kind of cloud, SaaS, IaaS, hosted private, or on-premise private. So we think that digital transformation is being powered by cloud. First of all, it is responsible for, the comprehensive kind of transformation of digital assets across organizations as CIOs sort of recognize the ability for cloud to be used as a sort of a proxy or an enabler for broader digital agendas. And I think we're moving into this phase, which means that cloud is going to be much more disruptive, than what's gone on in the past. We're already seeing this sort of a sea change in attitude, especially even in regulated industries where there is now, folks who are starting, to use cloud. And those who have, generally are saying that they can build things faster and quicker, and they can run their organizations better. But when does this transformation become, an emergency versus just an urgency? And, I think in my experience, enterprise IT follows a fairly predictable transformation process where no one really cares about it until someone in the sector gains some kind of benefit or value, and then the dominoes start to fall, right? And I think in the cloud segments, that first mover benefit has already been achieved, if you like, and transformation is going to follow pretty rapidly, especially when you consider, as I said earlier, it only takes a good idea, especially if you're going to use public cloud, because there's no additional, CapEx infrastructure costs. So cloud's becoming the new normal, if you like. So organizations are getting started with as a service wherever they can, rather than using undifferentiated, building their own stuff versus what's out there. So how do we, how do we find this? This comes directly again from the commentator network. So to understand, the frequency of, cloud first strategies now, we asked the commentator network, well, what do you expect cloud to be? Is it one of many options to be considered, or is it now your de facto IT platform? And it turns out that for about 40% of organizations, these are now moved onto a cloud-first footing. So, what's in it for me? What's in it for us as service providers? How do we make money out of this? So first of all, I think it's important to kind of level set and understand where we are. Amazon captures a lot of the, attention in terms of cloud, but when we look at exactly what kind of cloud services are in use and turning to the commentator network, what exactly are you using? In terms of SaaS, in terms of on-premise private cloud, IaaS or hosted cloud, it turns out that nearly 2/3 are already using SaaS. More than 40% are using on-premise or public cloud. And more than 1/3 are using hosted private cloud. Now that adds up to, clearly more than 100%. Organizations are already using multiple cloud services to meet their needs, which says that there's a significant opportunity for service providers to meet that need. But more importantly, what I think cloud does is that it impacts the internal operating model of organizations. So by its nature, it is consumption-based, service-driven, and has a retail model discipline. But when it comes, it brings in this need for a baked-in process change to move from top-down processes to continuous development, from upgrade and install to continuous integration. From time and materials to outcome-based. Overall, I like to think about it as moving from, ITIL to agile, if you like. And when we hear about, companies being all in on cloud, it doesn't mean all in on Amazon or Microsoft. It means being all in on this operating model. I'll just quickly refer to what Steve at HP was talking about earlier in terms of what that deployment model is going to look like. The ratio about 75% private and 26% public. Hybrid is becoming the standard, and there's some variation across different vertical markets, as you can see there. But it's not huge. All these organizations, all these verticals are going to be using different mixes to achieve their different needs. But end-user organizations, enterprises are under pressure, right? They're under pressure to pick the right partner. They're under pressure to deliver the benefits to my organization that my competitors are getting. They're under pressure to pick, a trusted advisor to help them with this. And, we say at the end of the beginning, we've sort of arrived at this place where there's a very confusing marketplace of all these different providers, different things you could buy, the different things that they do. We've got the hyperscalers there on the left. We've got the telcos and network service providers trying to reclaim their birthright. The regional providers who've got expertise in particular countries or sovereignty and so on. Then we have the resellers, the managed service providers, and the channel, the enterprise technology vendors, systems integrators and outsourcers and data center and colo. I'm exhausted already. How do I choose between, all of these? And they all have their relative strengths and weaknesses. And what that means, I think, is given that we know organizations are going to want multiple services, it presents a great opportunity for service providers to meet this need. And once we strip out the hyperscalers who are only concerned with selling their own services, what we're seeing here is the rise of this cloud service broker, if you like. So all of these companies are looking to provide access to not only their own services, but to provide you access to third-party services as well, because they know that if they want to land, to maintain, to grow those customer relationships, they need to do that, or the customer is simply going to go elsewhere. And I don't think that at this point, any one vendor or any one approach has a leading position here amongst this lot. The jury's still out on whether any or all of these are going to work at this point. But what we are going to do is to demonstrate the kind of things which you can do to help you, secure that future. And one of the things is to look beyond the infrastructure. So when we've asked, well, where is your cloud spending going to be going forwards, it turns out that the majority of it is going to be not on the infrastructure, but the game is really now on all of the things that are going to be delivered on top of that infrastructure, whether it's security services or application hosting or business process hosting or some combination of all of these things. So what we've done is to put together a kind of a handy cheat sheet or list of things that we think, organizations like ourselves should pay attention to in terms of service creation to meet that need. So managed security, so my colleague Adrian Sanabria is going to be talking about, the need for managed security services tomorrow morning. Analytics as a service. Dr. Katie Ring on my team is going to be talking about analytics as a service this afternoon at 2:30. And multi-cloud services. The other doctor on my team, I feel inadequate, Dr. Owen Rogers, is going to be talking about using multiple cloud services tomorrow in the context of our digital economics unit. And of course, while we know that the success stories in cloud with Amazon and so on about new application development, what else is going on out there in terms of application deployment? And we've asked the network, so apart from just the, that hyperscale piece, if you like, what else is going on in terms of the application deployment for cloud computing? Is it deploying only new apps? Is it modernizing your existing estate? Or indeed, is it migrating or refactoring existing applications? And it turns out that it's about equal amongst those three. In other words, there's, to be successful, the sunk costs by those service providers, they are going to have to be destinations not only for new application development, but for, these other activities as well, modernization and migration. That's going to be 2/3 of the go-forward opportunity here. So using a cloud service broker can, potentially bring you, some of these benefits. And you'll know that we've been talking about best execution venue for, nearly a decade now in terms of, a strategy that will help, match workloads and applications with the right resources. And that's what a cloud broker ought to be doing, providing access to a much greater number of services than you're going to be able to access, as an individual organization. And they should bring with them, some of these other benefits and capabilities as well. The speed, the consumption management and optimization, transformation services, decision engine, and so on. So, how are we going to secure this future? So first of all, let's take a kind of just a little backward step and see, well, where is the market going now? So first of all, we think that cloud services are going to dominate this market. I think by any kind of forecast, it's pretty clear which way the wind is blowing here in terms of service acquisition. Service providers already, own about 30% of infrastructure spend here. So it seems that going forward, this is going to be, an increasingly important spending segment. And indeed, the channels of distribution are going to grow in importance. And, perhaps we've seen just a small slither of that yesterday with the acquisition of Avnet Technology Services by Tech Data. These are the, if you like, the sleeping giants, I suppose, who are, punching under their weight at the moment in terms of, the size of these organizations relative to their participation in the cloud market at this moment. So they are variously partnering, acquiring in order, to try and understand how they can, be a bridge and get into this market. So, from our global commentator network, I convene a meeting of 60 or 70 CIOs from that network twice a year, once in London and once in New York. You may be familiar with our Cloud Executive Summit series. And what these folks who come along kindly do is to share, with our group their advice for peers in terms of, what their best practices are when they've been looking for service providers to meet their need. And first of all, they say, well, infrastructure as service is fine. However, it's insufficient, for my need. I need to work with providers who can not only host my solution, but can help manage it as well, who can have a vested interest in helping me, meet my business objectives and business goals. And, so clearly that's what I was referring to in talking about those other kinds of services which are going to be important here. So secondly, they're looking to work with providers who can help them develop, centers of excellences and develop new skills, especially, where they may not have it around these systems of engagement, whether it's mobile, whether it's big data, whether it's DevOps. They want to work with providers who can collaborate with them to help them augment whatever internal expertise they may already have. So avoiding vendor lock-in seems pretty straightforward, and that doesn't only mean being tied to a single vendor. Although I will say, I'm sure you may be familiar with this sort of mantra that's falling into use in terms of the CIOs that I speak with, which is Amazon plus one, which is the kind of a guiding principle at the moment. In other words, whatever public cloud you're using, make sure you're using something else as well, if only for fiduciary and governance reasons and so on. It also means making sure that the provider can give you the self-service control over those services that you're going to need. And I would add also that there are many out there that advocate they can give you a single pane of glass. And my warning is that can easily become a single glass of pain. And so I would say just beware, and when someone comes on about that single pane. So enterprise engagement. So actually I think it was Michelle who referred, and maybe Steve as well, who referred to the fact that enterprises actually want to engage with providers who speak their language, who can provide them with multi-year contracts, who don't just give them a WYSIWYG experience. There's too much just what you see is what you get. Enterprises, are not used to dealing that way. If you want them as customers, you're going to have to engage, with their language. So use suppliers that can manage flexibility. In other words, suppliers that can turn things on but turn them off as well, that can turn them up and can turn them down as well. I think some of the cloud consumption management optimization vendors reckon that there's as much as 50% of all of the money that's spent on Amazon is wasted at the moment because it's going on unused cycles and so on. Going to the cloud is a fear for CIOs because they have this specter of, this bill shock, this cost just running away, and that is a real fear. And so I think organisations, service providers, need to pay particular attention to how they can support, consumption management and optimization and billing and so on. And I would counsel that remember. That really it's having a secure and highly available service at low cost. Well, that is much more important to our group than the inner workings, the inner technology of the system. Overall, they want to have my cloud, my way. So what can you do specifically to support that? So I think between the last few talks, what you've heard is that we as service providers need to raise our software IQ generally, and that security is a good place to start. I think Michelle pointed to the fact that customer loyalty at the moment is quite high, which means focusing on the, a lifetime value of these relationships rather than just trying to, suck people in on a short-term deal or for a short-term view. Focus on, outcomes and outputs rather than the widgets and the applications and the time and materials as the input to contract. Find ways of, helping organizations modernize their estates or having, either, improved revenue or cost savings as the SLA. And, at what speed can this happen? Well, I think the opportunity really is going to be mitigated by the extent to which service providers can shrink wrap and de-risk those services for that audience. So I want to take you back just to the slide at the beginning. So what that says really is that, not only enterprises but service providers as well must transform, because if they don't, they'll die. Thank you. So firstly, we have Dan Cordingley, say hi. We have Chuck Dubuque, say hi. And we have Will Iverson from Dev9.
Hello.
So I'm going to let them all just introduce themselves to you, because I'm pretty sure that not all of you are going to be familiar with these organizations. So Chuck, do you want to go first and just let these
Sure.
folks who know you are and what you do?
So I'm Chuck Dubuque. I run product and solutions marketing for Tintri. And for those of you who don't know us, Tintri is a storage startup that's been in business for about 5 years. We sell a storage box. And from a hardware standpoint, we're not very much different from all the other vendors out there. What we focus on is what we call VM-aware storage. So our file system fundamentally doesn't deal with usual storage things. It deals with VMs and soon containers, and provides services at that level. So a lot of our service provider customers get a lot of value in not having to translate between the things that their customers care about and the things that they bill on, which are applications that are virtualized, and storage constructs.
So you're effectively an arms provider to the service providers.
Yes.
Then?
We are infrastructure, but we provide services that go beyond just bits and bytes.
Okay. So that's storage. So Dan Teradici, who I think we probably know as the VDI and workspace company, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's correct. So, thank you, William. So Teradici, we're best known for our PC over IP technology. It's widely used for delivering really outstanding user experiences from the data center or from the cloud, doing that really securely. We're really well known through our partnership with VMware, so VMware Horizon, their VDI product and DAS product, all built on PC over IP technology for that great remoting experience. And then a few years ago, we announced a very successful relationship with AWS, as AWS looked to help their customers migrate Windows desktops onto the AWS cloud. And while we're really well known for VDI and DAS, and we've helped so many customers deploy VDI and DAS, really one of the things we've seen over the last couple of years is customers approaching us and saying, hey, I have these specific workloads or these specific rich client applications that I really want to figure out how to move to the cloud. And it's really amazing the type of customers that have come to us. Some of the world's leading movie studios, television networks, auto space, and automotive companies wanting to run CAD/CAM in the cloud. And so, we're seeing, and you heard a lot in Michelle's talk, we're seeing a lot of customers really looking at not just, new cloud native apps, but really how do I move these existing rich client applications, maybe I've invested in them over the years, developed them myself as an enterprise, or really rich ISV apps that people want to now run in the cloud and really exploit the power of the cloud. So yesterday we announced our cloud access software, which is a way to let enterprises, ISVs, and most importantly, service providers like yourself really help customers move those apps to the cloud.
Cool.
So that's what we do.
Thanks. Cool.
Hi, I'm Will Iverson. I'm the CTO and co-owner of Dev9. You can tell I'm a CTO because I can't be bothered to tuck my shirt in. Dev9, we're, like I said, a custom software development company up in Seattle. We're about 100 people, and we work with a lot of the name brands that you probably are familiar with to build the software that they use to power their sites. So if you've booked a hotel, if you use a video game console, if you are into sports and you visit some of the most popular sports sites, you're using software that we built for those companies. And we've been doing that in large part using the cloud. So we're partners with AWS, and when you try to scale to hundreds of thousands of transactions a second, you need to have a partner to work with to help you do that and deploy to AWS well. So there you go.
Okay. So it was interesting to me that you guys kindly wanted to be associated with the talk and the panel on cloud and digital transformation, because you wouldn't be, for me, the go-to to understand what's happening with cloud and digital transformation. So I want to make sure that the audience here can understand what your role in cloud and digital transformation is, and at least what the experience is for your customers in that regard, because it seems like everyone has a role to play, and I think hearing from you guys will cement that. So, Chuck, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, we're part of the plumbing of offering either private cloud for enterprises who want to build their own, or a service provider that's building, whether it's infrastructure as a service, PaaS, or SaaS solutions to their customers. We fundamentally believe that to be successful at that, you need to go beyond just how much flash you have in your storage, or how new the user interface is, and really focus on the storage services that the platform offers. So we have customers, for example, in the private cloud space, a leading manufacturer of software that a lot of you might be familiar with. They run their private development cloud on site with us because it's their intellectual property, so they're not eager to put it on the public cloud. But they can run across 8 data centers over, I think it's 5 petabytes of our storage on 75 separate arrays, with a cloud that they built themselves based on CloudStack, VMware, and other solutions. And they manage the storage piece of that with one person. And that one person spends most of their time thinking about higher level things, policy-based management and things like that, rather than the usual storage admin who's tearing their hair out because they're trying to put out storage fires. Okay. On the service provider space, we have a customer in South Carolina who has used our storage for the last 3 years, has increased their storage footprint by 4x, while their revenue has hockey sticked. And again, they haven't hired any additional storage admins to do that, partly because our systems are autonomous. They do everything at the VM level, and partially because we offer them some value-added services when it comes to copy data management for DevOps, or array-to-array replication at the VM level that really allow them to get order of magnitude better cost savings with our platform.
So speeding things up, freeing up resources,
doing things faster with fewer people,
okay.
And doing some unique things too that are hard to do unless your hardware has some intelligence built into it.
Okay. And Dan, so this new platform then, is that really a kind of a pivot for the company? Is that really going to be the front cover for you guys going forwards?
Yeah, I think it is. While VDI and DaaS is a tremendous market for us, what's really exciting is what we are seeing in public cloud. So to give a really good example of, to answer your question, where we play in this cloud transformation, this digital transformation, we recently announced a new partnership with Microsoft, with the Azure team. And the public cloud vendors are basically now putting GPU instances into the public cloud. So now you can run really rich, vivid graphics applications in the public cloud. And the reason they're doing this, and the reason this is so interesting, is if you think about some of the vertical industries that could really tap into the public cloud. So movie studios, you're talking about petabytes of data for a major motion picture, hundreds or thousands of people working on that blockbuster movie. the cloud scaling, the elasticity of compute for rendering, all of that is hugely attractive to an industry like that. But you can play that out in oil and gas, automotive and aerospace. I mean, there's a lot of verticals that really represent a tremendous value when they move into the public cloud. Now, the problem is today, you can't run the application the user's using, like Autodesk Maya or Dassault CATIA's CAD program. You have to run that on-premise on a big, fat workstation that you have to manage. You have to shuttle data back and forth. It's a security risk. What do you use for independent contractors and third parties? So the idea of moving that final user application, that big graphics application into the cloud, where now you have everything in the cloud, I mean, real magic of the cloud then happens, right? Because everything runs super fast, all the data stays in the cloud. If you have to enable third parties or contractors, you just give them access to the cloud. And that's a really good example of where Teradici is really enabling that for Microsoft's customers, to enable them to really get the full benefit of the cloud by using our cloud access software to deliver that vivid remote user experience securely. And so we're seeing a lot more of that. We're seeing a lot of customers come in, again, either with these graphics-rich ISV apps or ISV apps that, or their own applications that they've developed over the years. We're seeing customers really, struggling with this whole cloud native thing because, yeah, I'm going to maybe invest in taking my enterprise app to cloud native, but now you've got to re-architect it. You've got to maybe hire different type of developers. You're now hiring Java developers versus .NET developers, and that all takes time and money. And again, what they want to do is be able to lift and shift those applications right away. They want to get the benefit of the cloud today, not in a year or two once they've migrated to cloud native. So I think that's our role in sort of this digital transformation, this transformation to the cloud.
And Will, so are your customers, do you see that they are using cloud and transforming and then using that as a springboard to do other things? Because you presumably have a view into that whole kind of life cycle. What's that?
Yeah, so it's interesting listening to sort of the conversation up here about the different kinds of services. So as a custom software shop, a lot of our clients, they'll either launch a brand new initiative on the cloud or they're migrating something. The simple thing to do, of course, is just to take an existing app and now I move it off of a VM on-premise onto the cloud, and that's not necessarily that interesting. It's a thing to do, maybe for cost reasons or something, but once you then say, okay, well, how are we going to have these applications really take advantage of the cloud? That's a big part of the conversation that we wind up having with them.
Got it.
And so if you say, I have an application that I only use part of the year and I want to scale it up and scale it down. I want to be able to rebuild the application so it's easy to deploy. One of the things that the cloud lets you do is I can now push a button and I can deploy my app across 50 or 100 different servers and different data centers all over the world. People come to us because we use automation for that. I mean, you don't want to have a sysadmin in there clicking buttons all night long to deploy to all those data centers. So we automate the build process, the testing, the perf testing, and the deployment. So to get to scale, if I just have a traditional app that I copied over on one VM and say, okay, well, now I want to scale it out, that doesn't really work. So we become a part of that conversation. So it's kind of an interesting thing, because if you said, well, maybe I have an existing app today and I just want to move it over and have it run in a VM today, or I just want to have a single desktop app that I'm putting in the cloud, that's one strategy. We're more of we're going to help you take your software and scale it out across the whole environment.
And I think to add to that, I mean, customers we talk to actually are doing both, right? Some applications clearly go re-architect them, go do cloud native. That's the only way that app's really going to be able to be fully exploited on the cloud. Other apps, not so much. And I think giving customers both options so they can speed their move to the cloud.
So we talked about the technology now. I mean, the other things really that I referenced is, the economic piece and the organizational piece. So you've all referenced how you're part of, or can be part of this journey, if you like. But who, on the end user side then is in charge of making that happen? Who owns and makes those changes, and what is the role of IT in that? Is that changing? Or do organizations have to do things differently culturally and organizationally in order for this to happen? I mean, this is a whole new way of doing things, right?
Yeah, I think some of that varies depending on what you're trying to do. I mean, it's funny, we use this term cloud transformation, right? And we'll talk to some folks and they think that means, well, I'm moving from on-premise Exchange to hosted, which is really not the point, not necessarily the point, but that's the sort of thing that I would expect to be an IT-driven initiative, right? It's easy transformation they make. If I'm talking about new products that I want to build, or I have a lot of different departmental apps that I want to move over, well, now I can't just have IT show up and say, you're the ones that have to do this. The business has to be driving it and then working with an IT and possibly a service provider. You know, if it's a very storage-centric application, then maybe I'm talking to one provider. If it's you know, compute-driven or something like a lot of the clients that we work with where they're consumer-facing, a lot of scale, and they need to re-architect applications. Well, that's a different approach. But either way, you have to have all those different groups coming together.
Okay. Chuck?
I mean, what we find is that, you know, internal IT in an enterprise has to compete with the public cloud. So increasingly, or the people who hold the budget or hold the vision for which applications are going to drive the business don't care about the storage, they don't care about the networking, they don't care about the compute, they care about the application and that it happens. And there's an easy substitute, which is, at least in their mind, which is going to the cloud. So internal IT has to transform to meet that challenge. For service providers, Amazon is the big 800-pound gorilla. I can do everything in Amazon at a click. I have to compete with that, but I can't do it on cost. So I have to find different ways to do that in terms of services, in terms of knowing my customer's business, but still being able to meet their cost demands. So increasingly the IT function, the infrastructure that, you know, our company plays in has to become programmable, has to become abstracted from the hardware and provide service just like it were an Amazon.
And does that mean that they expect to be able to enjoy the benefits of public cloud if they're doing it on premise and themselves? I mean, that's tough, right?
Increasingly, that's you know, that's the conundrum that I think a lot of our customers face is that, and we see smaller SMBs, smaller enterprises moving much more to the cloud because they can't meet that level of service with the service level guarantees, with the programmability of just going to a self-service portal to provide what the application needs. For mid to large size enterprises, their challenge is how can we match a lot of that agility, a lot of that cost benefit, and do it as a team of generalists without having to have the legacy baggage of folks who know storage back to the mainframe or know how to do compute for, you know, power and mainframes and other things that nobody cares about anymore.
And I would just add, you know, from our perspective, you know, when we engage with customers, usually through partners like VMware or AWS on things like VDI and DAS, I mean, it's very much it's with the desktop people. It is a cost-driven, you know, delivering the corporate desktop is often it's a cost-driven, it's a have-to-have. When we engage with customers on these applications moving into the public cloud, I mean, IT people are involved, but it appears to us in many cases it's a much more strategic conversation you're having because it's usually the core of the company's business. You know, if you design cars and you want to do now all your CAD and move your, you know, manufacturing analytics and things like that onto the cloud, that is what you do as a company. So we find ourselves meeting much more with CTO, people on the business strategy side. Words that we hear in customer meetings are, this is transformative, this is game-changing, this is going to unlock so much value to our operations. So at least from Teradici's side, we see the two different worlds. One, DAS, VDI being very much an operational kind of thing, and these discussions on cloud transformation really very strategic to the customer.
One of the drivers that we've noticed is when we go to work with an IT team, they may have been used to deploying on a quarterly schedule. And we'll come in and we'll say, well, we actually want to do build and test and deploys on a 50 machine cluster 3 times a week. And so if the IT team can't support that, then we wind up working with them to figure out what the strategy is going to be and how to do it. But it's a huge change culturally to go from one kind of release model to a different, much faster one. Huge change.
So that's the move from, you know, the waterfall and sort of the ITIL world to this more agile.
Yeah, we started doing agile software development, a lot of the folks that founded the company over 10 years ago. And so part of where we wound up today was, you know, you'd say, well, we're going to do a deployment every 2 weeks. Even back then, you know, 12 years ago, we started doing that. So when you say that you're going to do a deployment, that means that you have to have a complete regression pass, perf test, everything. And if you have a manual test team, they're just going to drown. They won't be able to catch up. So that really laid the foundation for the automation that we used. We used to do a lot of that on-prem, and now with the cloud, it allows us to work with clients to set up environments, do all the testing, tear it down very, very quickly. So it's a huge change, yeah.
And what is this world going to look like going forwards then? I mean, I guess we're still sitting here talking about infrastructure when virtualization's been around for 20 years, and we thought that, you know, the infrastructure might become invisible by now, but the industry finds ways to reinvent infrastructure so it is always surfaced. And I just wonder to what extent, you know, in the real world, organizations consider their future to be one associated with VMs or containers or anything else, or do they not care so much about what the actual mechanism is?
Yeah, so the nice thing about a VM is that it's fairly portable, right? The vendors, and AWS is in this space, and Google and Microsoft with Azure, they are offering higher level services. So I can go ahead and build to those platforms and APIs. The concern is that if I build something on top of those platforms, now I have vendor lock-in. We're seeing a lot of people really excited about and using Docker. It's actually one of the fastest technologies I've seen adopted in the enterprise. We have a lot of very large clients that adopted it very quickly. And it lets them sort of have a little bit of best of both worlds. I can build an application, target a container, I can run that on the local developer workstation, and then I can also put those containers in the cloud. For us, one of the big issues is traceability. I need to be able to say exactly where every file used on an application, you know, how it was configured, how it was built, tested. I need to be able to trace that all the way back to the person on their desktop that wrote that code. And Docker has solutions that allow us to do that. We can trace not just the applications and how those are built, but even the environments and how they're configured and managed and deployed. And so I think that right now that's kind of where the industry is drifting, because it's the closest thing there is to a portable standard between all these VM systems, right? Or these container systems. So I can kind of build something and feel like I'm vendor independent, but still build something.
And also, unlike VM, you know, virtualization, it's not tied to a hardware refresh, right? So, you know, where virtualization took 15 years to work through on the back of refreshes, it's not the case for Docker. So, but your two organizations, I mean, is container, you know, the container model front and center of where people are heading right now, or just really something that's out there that might be useful?
Yeah, I mean, I can say from our perspective, you know, most of our customer conversations on our cloud access software are really the three major public cloud vendors. And, you know, whether it's a Linux VM for a Linux application, a Windows VM, or a container, they just want the ability to do all of those. Just had a ISV turn on a container-based application with our software recently. So I think some the VM is easy. It's already in a VM. Just get that into the public cloud. But yeah, I think there is interest in containers. I would also echo what Will said. Is we see, and it was in Michelle's data, we see most of our conversations when we say to the customer, well, what public cloud do you want to run on? They clearly know which one they want to go on. They know, but almost all of them say, I love your software because I know I can move to the others if and when I need to. So they are looking for that portability, although they're very sure at the initial stage which cloud vendor they want.
What about in your buyers? Do they care?
I mean, I think most of the decision makers, the application owners, maybe have a fashion vote in terms of it'd be great if we did containers, but ultimately what they care about is the apps. On the infrastructure side, I think that in addition to containers, folks want to be able to use multiple hypervisors. They're looking at maybe using those Hyper-V instances that they have in their ELA that they haven't used before. They're looking towards OpenStack and other solutions, and ultimately having the ability to have all of those arrows in your quiver to meet the challenge of whatever the project is. And then containers, I think right now, as a more emerging technology, it's something that you try to work in on the infrastructure side if you can, if it makes sense, if it adds some value and gets you some practice with it as the technology matures.
Sure.
I mean, I think it's key to point out from a vendor standpoint, the big fear, of course, is that you're going to wind up locked into somebody like an Oracle, and they're going to show up one day with a huge bill for all that plumbing that you have on the cloud infrastructure. Right now, we're in a situation where all of the cloud vendors are pushing each other down in pricing. So we haven't had anybody come in and say, yeah, I built all my stuff on a cloud and now I'm getting really hosed on it. So when will that happen? When will the thing flip around? I don't know. With Moore's Law and the storage falling, the prices and everything, it could be a while. I mean, you know, Oracle, I think, just announced like a couple days ago they were going to get in, but you know, one of the market people said, well, they don't have 0.1, so we don't even have coverage on them yet for cloud. So for the foreseeable future, I think that we're in a good spot from a pricing, you know, everybody's just going to keep whacking it down, so.
Yeah, and I referred to Al Sadowski's panel tomorrow on, you know, is AWS the winner? Of course, Larry Ellison, you know, believes that they are not the winner, so we shall see. Does anyone in the audience have a question for the panelists here? Can I see anyone with a raised hand? I do over here on the right-hand side, please.
Good. Hello. Quick question. So we've talked a lot about the technology. Can you talk a little bit about the business disruption that you've enabled? Give us an example of business disruption that your technology has enabled with the customers that you've engaged with.
Sure. On the infrastructure side, we've worked with several customers, including the DoD. One of my favorite case studies is DoD, as you can imagine, is very concerned about cyber warfare, and part of their mandate is to practice a response to a cyber threat. So they set up these massive simulations. They deploy hundreds of VMs on either side. They have them fight it out, and then they learn and they iterate. And with their previous infrastructure, it used to take them 16 hours to deploy every single simulation to run it, and it would run for maybe a day. But that's 16 hours during which things could change or somebody wants to try something new, you'd have to start all over again. Because of our technology, we've enabled them to do that same refresh of the environments in less than 30 minutes. So those kinds of order of magnitude changes, if there's a technology that offers them, you know, saving 3 or 4 hours for copy data management in an agile scrum cycle where you're trying to update all your developers to the latest version. Other technologies might take you 4 to 8 hours. If you can do it in 20 or 30 minutes, it's worth your time. And those are the kinds of things that we've done.
Dan?
Yeah, a good example is a company called Bebop Technology. They're a Hollywood systems integrator, service provider. And it really helped studios over the years migrate to different workflows, studios and TV networks. And so they took our software and have written some orchestration software on top of it. But they're able to now go to the major studios, the major TV networks, and allow them to run things like Autodesk Maya for effects, or Adobe Premiere or Avid for video editing in the cloud very seamlessly. And what the studios love is that their editors and artists don't have to learn any new tools. It's the exact same tool they use, and now those studios and networks can get the full benefit out of the cloud, solving all those security issues and operational issues I talked about before.
Cool.
So I would say the big one for almost all of our customers is that we cut their release cycle down to essentially nothing. So, you know, it might be 3 months to deploy or once a month deploy. Now we deploy multiple times a day into production. It's not an issue. If you said one of the sort of examples, we're a little tricky because a lot of our clients are really large companies with lots of lawyers. So I have to be a little careful what I talk about. But one of the systems that we've got that I think is really cool is it's hundreds of thousands of write transactions a second. We're managing their inventory in real time. And so then they're able to float in real time new inventory levels to their customers and their suppliers. And it's just completely changing how they're able to build and deploy. I mean, this used to be something, it was science fiction for them to be able to do it. And now it's, you know, terabytes of data, you know, an hour, petabytes of data, and even on a daily or week. So it's a really huge transformative thing for them to be able to do that kind of real-time inventory at that scale. It's been really great.
New normal, great. Well, listen, thanks very much indeed. Please, a hand for my panelists.